The rifle cracked. Smoke billowed from the barrel. A man fell backward, clutching his chest. The crowd gasped. Silence fell over the town square. This story is a work of fiction, crafted by AI. But the injustice it depicts, that's older than memory. But to understand how it came to this, we need to go back. Back to the moment it all started. Let me take you back to the town of Deadwood, where they were building a gallows in the middle of Main Street. Right there, for everyone to see. The wood creaked as they hammered it together. The rope hung down, thick and ugly. Henry Blackwood sat in his cell just across the street. His eyes were open. He wasn't crying. He wasn't begging. He was just waiting. His hands were bound behind his back. His clothes were dirty. His face was pale. The whole town watched. They stood on the boardwalks. They peeked out from windows. Not one of them said a word. Not one of them tried to stop it. Sheriff Silas Thorne supervised the construction. He was a big man with a mustache. He wore a star on his vest. He smiled as the gallows took shape. "Make sure it's strong," he said. "We don't want any accidents." Henry's wife, Lydia, stood near the saloon. She held a handkerchief to her face. Her eyes were red. She had been crying for days. No one comforted her. They just watched. They watched the town prepare to hang an innocent man. The stranger rode into town then. He stopped his horse at the edge of the square. He didn't dismount. He just watched. His red bandana stood out against his gray vest. His rifle rested across his lap. He said nothing. Lydia saw him. She looked at him. Her eyes pleaded. She didn't speak. She couldn't. But he understood. Father Thomas stood near the church. He crossed himself. He looked away. He knew the truth. But he stayed quiet, like everyone else. The stranger's gaze moved from the gallows to the jail, to Henry's face, to the sheriff's smile, to the crowd's silence. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? The stranger slid down from his horse. His boots hit the dusty street with a soft thud. He walked toward the saloon where Lydia stood. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. The stranger stopped beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just watched the gallows being built. The hammering echoed through the quiet street. "Your husband," the stranger finally said. His voice was low, not loud, just clear. Lydia flinched. She turned to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "They say he killed Reginald Ashworth," she whispered. "They say he robbed him, shot him in the back." The stranger nodded. "And the evidence?" Lydia shook her head. "They found a gun in his barn, his gun. They say it matches the bullets. They found money in his house, Ashworth's money. They say he confessed." She looked away. "But he didn't do it. I know he didn't. He was with me that night, at home, all night." The stranger looked toward the jail cell. Henry sat on the floor. His head was bowed. His hands were still bound. He didn't look up. He didn't move. The stranger walked toward the jail. Sheriff Thorne saw him coming. He wiped his hands on his pants. He straightened his vest. He put on a smile. "Helping with the construction?" Thorne asked. His voice was friendly. Too friendly. The stranger shook his head. "Just passing through. Saw the commotion." "Commotion?" Thorne laughed. "Justice being served, that's all. Henry Blackwood killed a good man, a rich man, a man who did a lot for this town." The stranger didn't react. "And the evidence?" Thorne's smile didn't waver. "Overwhelming. Blackwood's gun, the money, his own confession. The man was guilty as sin. The stranger looked past Thorne, at Henry, at the rope hanging from the gallows, at the crowd watching from the boardwalks. "People seem to believe you," the stranger said. Thorne nodded. "People want to believe in order, in justice, in a world that makes sense. A man like Ashworth killed? It doesn't make sense. A man like Blackwood doing it? That makes sense. It's simpler." The stranger didn't say anything. He just watched Thorne, watched the way his eyes shifted, watched the way he stood too close to the gallows, watched the way he smiled when he talked about a dead man. "Tomorrow at noon," Thorne said. "The hanging. Justice will be served." The stranger turned and walked away. He didn't look back. He walked back to his horse, mounted up, sat tall in the saddle. He looked at the town, at the gallows, at the jail, at the saloon where Lydia stood alone. And then he saw something. Something no one else noticed. A man standing in the shadows near the sheriff's office, watching, listening. Not part of the crowd, not part of the town, just watching. The stranger rode toward him. The man didn't move, didn't run, just waited. "Who are you?" the stranger asked. The man looked at him. His eyes were wary. "Nobody important, just a traveler." The stranger didn't believe him. "You know something about Ashworth's death." The man swallowed hard. "Maybe I heard things people shouldn't hear." The stranger waited. The man shifted his weight, looked toward the jail, looked toward the saloon, looked toward the gallows. "People talk," the man finally said, "about business deals gone wrong, about land disputes, about men who wanted what Ashworth had." The stranger didn't move. "What did you hear?" The man shook his head. "Nothing concrete, just rumors, just whispers. But I heard something else too, something important." The stranger leaned forward. "What?" The man looked around. "I heard that Blackwood was in town the night Ashworth died. But not in Deadwood, in the next town over, at the saloon, with witnesses who can place him there." The stranger's gaze hardened. "Why didn't anyone say anything?" The man shrugged. "Who would listen to me? Who would believe a stranger over the sheriff, over the evidence?" The stranger nodded. He understood now. The frame job. The manufactured evidence. The town's willingness to believe a simple story over a complicated truth. He looked back at the gallows, at the jail, at Lydia standing alone by the saloon. "This ends today," the stranger said. Not to the man, to himself, to the town, to the injustice hanging in the air. The stranger rode away, not leaving, just changing his position, watching, waiting, planning. The truth was out there. He just had to find it, before the noose tightened around Henry Blackwood's neck. And he would find it. Because in the West, justice wasn't served by the law. It was served by those willing to stand when everyone else stayed silent. Keep watching, because what this man does next is something you won't see coming. The stranger walked towards the jail. His boots made soft sounds on the dusty street. People watched him go. They didn't speak. They just watched. The sheriff's office door opened. Silas Thorne stepped out. He saw the stranger heading toward the jail. His face hardened. "Can't go in there," Thorne said, stepping in front of the jail door. "The prisoner is being prepared for tomorrow. No visitors." The stranger stopped. He looked at Thorne, then at the jail, then back at Thorne. "I need to speak with Henry Blackwood." Thorne shook his head. "No one speaks with him. Not anymore. The trial is over. The verdict is in. Tomorrow he pays for his crime." The stranger didn't move. "I have questions about the night Ashworth died." Thorne's jaw tightened. The case is closed. Blackwood confessed. His gun was found. The money was found. The witnesses testified. Everything is settled." "Not everything," the stranger said. "I heard something today about Blackwood being in another town the night Ashworth died." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Rumors. Just rumors. Blackwood was here. In Deadwood. That's where he committed the murder." The stranger didn't back down. "Prove it. Where was he between 8 and 10 p.m. that night? Who saw him?" Thorne hesitated. "That's not important. What's important is that he killed Ashworth, and tomorrow he'll hang for it." The stranger looked past Thorne, at the jail window, at the shadow of a man moving inside. "Let me speak with him. 1 minute." Thorne glared. "No, I said no." The stranger didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for his gun. He just stood there, looking at Thorne, waiting. Thorne shifted his weight, looked around, at the people watching, at the gallows being built, at the sun starting to set. 1 minute, Thorne finally said, "but I'll be right outside, and if you try anything—" The stranger nodded. He stepped past Thorne and entered the jail. The door closed behind him. It was dark inside, smelled of damp earth and fear. Henry Blackwood sat on a cot in the corner. His hands were bound. His face was bruised. "You're not the priest," Henry said. His voice was rough, weak. The stranger approached slowly. "No, I'm not." Henry looked up. His eyes were tired, defeated. "Then why are you here? To watch me hang? Everyone else is." The stranger stopped a few feet away. "I heard you didn't kill Ashworth." Henry looked away. "Doesn't matter what I did or didn't do. Tomorrow I die." "I heard you were in another town that night," the stranger said. "At a saloon." Henry looked back at him, surprise in his eyes. "How do you know that?" "Someone told me," the stranger said. "Someone who heard things people shouldn't hear." Henry swallowed hard. "It's true. I was in Silver Creek, at the saloon. I got there around 7 p.m., stayed until after midnight. The bartender can vouch for me, so can 3 other regulars." The stranger nodded. "Why didn't you say that at the trial?" Henry looked down at his hands. "I did. No one believed me. The sheriff said I was lying, said I came back to Deadwood after killing Ashworth, said I had time." The stranger looked around the jail cell, at the dirty floor, at the bars on the window, at the despair hanging in the air. "Who was Ashworth arguing with that night?" the stranger asked, "before he died." Henry thought for a moment. "I didn't see anything, but I heard whispers about business deals gone wrong, about land, about money." The stranger leaned forward. "Who?" Henry shook his head. "I don't know for sure, but people talked about Ashworth and his partner, someone named Ashworth. Same last name. Family, maybe. They were always arguing. About money, about land, about something big." The stranger straightened up. "What about the bartender in Silver Creek? Would he testify?" Henry nodded. "Yes, if he wasn't scared." "Scared of what?" the stranger asked. "Of the sheriff," Henry said. "Of Thorne. He has friends in high places. People who can make bad things happen to people who cross him." The stranger turned toward the door. "I'll be back." Henry looked at him, hope flickering in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" The paused at the door, looked back at Henry. "Because no one else will." He opened the door and stepped out. Thorne was waiting right there, too close. "Everything all right in there?" Thorne asked. The stranger nodded. "Everything's fine." Thorne studied his face. He confessed again. Just now. Said he did it. Said he's ready to hang. The stranger didn't react. "Where's the saloon in Silver Creek?" Thorne's eyes narrowed. Why do you care? Just curious, the stranger said. Heard it's a nice place. Thorne studied him for a moment longer, then stepped aside. It's across the river, about 2 hours' ride. The stranger nodded. He walked back to his horse, mounted up, rode out of town, not toward Silver Creek yet. First, he needed to find someone who knew more about Ashworth and his partner, someone who wasn't afraid to talk. He rode toward the edge of town, toward the small house on the outskirts, where Father Thomas lived, the priest who knew the truth but was too afraid to speak. He stopped his horse outside the house, knocked on the door, waited. The door opened. Father Thomas stood there. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. You shouldn't be here, the priest whispered. Thorne will hear. He'll know. The stranger stepped forward. I need to know about Ashworth, about his partner. Father Thomas looked around, nervous. What do you want to know? Everything, the stranger said, starting with why you're afraid to tell the truth. Father Thomas swallowed hard, looked back into his house, then at the stranger, then at the setting sun. I should never have come here, the priest said. I should have stayed in the city, where things were simpler. The stranger waited, patient, silent. The truth is dangerous, Father Thomas finally said. Ashworth wasn't just killed, he was murdered by someone he trusted, someone who stood to gain everything from his death. The stranger didn't move. Who? Father Thomas looked around again, whispered. His partner, his own cousin. They had a business together, a big one. But they were fighting. About land, about money, about who was really in charge. The stranger nodded. And Blackwood? Blackwood was just in the way, Father Thomas said. He owned land that Ashworth wanted, land that was valuable, land that the cousin wanted too. So they framed him, made sure he'd take the fall. The stranger straightened up. Where can I find the bartender in Silver Creek? Father Thomas shook his head. You can't. Not tonight. Thorne's men are watching. They'll see you. They'll stop you. The stranger looked towards the setting sun, then back at the priest. Then I'll go tomorrow, before the hanging. Father Thomas looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. Who are you? The stranger didn't answer. He turned his horse, rode back toward town, toward the jail, toward the gallows, toward the truth that no one wanted to see. And he knew, tomorrow would change everything, for Henry Blackwood, for the town of Deadwood, for justice itself. What he found inside. He hadn't been prepared for that. The stranger rode hard toward Silver Creek. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. His horse moved steadily beneath him. The red bandana around his neck fluttered in the morning breeze. He didn't look back. He kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. 2 hours later, he reached the small town of Silver Creek. It was quieter than Deadwood. Fewer people. Less tension. He tied his horse outside the saloon and stepped inside. The air smelled of whiskey and sawdust. A few men sat at tables, nursing drinks. They glanced at him but didn't speak. The bartender was a man in his 50s, with a thick mustache and tired eyes. He wiped the counter with a rag. He didn't look up when the stranger entered. I need to talk to you about Henry Blackwood, the stranger said. The bartender stopped wiping. He looked at the stranger. His eyes narrowed. I don't know any Henry Blackwood. The stranger leaned on the counter. He was here, the night Reginald Ashworth was killed, between 7 p.m. and midnight. The bartender's hand tightened on the rag. I don't know what you're talking about. I do, the stranger said. And you do too. Blackwood was a regular. You served him drinks. You talked with him. You know he couldn't have been in Deadwood killing Ashworth that night." The bartender looked around the room. The other patrons had stopped their conversations. They were watching now, listening. "Look," the bartender said, his voice low. "I don't want any trouble." "Neither do I," the stranger said. "I just want the truth about where Blackwood was that night." The bartender sighed. He put the rag down, leaned closer. "Blackwood was here. From 7 p.m. until after midnight. I served him whiskey. We talked about the weather, about his wife, about the crops." The stranger nodded. "Anyone else remember him being here?" The bartender shook his head. "No one will say anything, not after what happened to the last person who talked." "What happened?" the stranger asked. "The sheriff's men came," the bartender said. "They took him away, said he was spreading lies, haven't seen him since." "When was this?" the stranger asked. 2 weeks ago, right after Ashworth was killed." The stranger straightened up. "Who was this man?" "Name was Jed," the bartender said. "He worked at the livery stable, said he saw Blackwood here that night, said he'd swear to it in court." The stranger looked at the bartender. "Where can I find Jed?" The bartender shook his head. "I don't know. They took him away. No one knows where." The stranger turned to leave. The bartender called after him. "Be careful, mister. This town isn't what it seems. There's more going on than meets the eye." The stranger stopped, looked back. "What do you mean?" The bartender hesitated, then leaned closer again. "Ashworth wasn't just killed. He was murdered by someone who wanted what he had. Someone powerful. Someone who made sure Blackwood would take the fall." The stranger nodded. "His partner?" The bartender's eyes widened. "You know too much. You should leave. Now." The stranger walked out of the saloon, mounted his horse, rode back toward Deadwood. He had what he needed. Proof that Blackwood couldn't have killed Ashworth. Proof that someone had framed him, but he still didn't know who the real killer was. Or why. He rode hard. The sun was higher now. The day was getting hotter. He thought about Jed, the man who disappeared after speaking the truth, about the bartender's warning, about the power behind the murder. When he reached Deadwood, he went straight to the sheriff's office. Silas Thorne was behind his desk. He looked up when the stranger entered. "Back so soon?" Thorne asked. "Find what you were looking for in Silver Creek?" The stranger didn't answer. He walked to the desk, looked Thorne in the eye. "I talked to the bartender. He remembers Blackwood being there the night Ashworth died." Thorne's face hardened. "Lies. The man's a drunk. He doesn't know what he's talking about." "He's not lying," the stranger said. "And there was another witness, a man named Jed. He disappeared after telling people what he knew." Thorne stood up. His hand moved toward his gun. "I don't know what you're talking about." The stranger didn't flinch. "I think you do. I think you know exactly what happened to Ashworth, and why Blackwood is taking the fall for it." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "You're playing a dangerous game, stranger." "So are you," the stranger said. "The truth has a way of coming out, no matter how hard you try to bury it." Thorne glared at him. "Get out of my office." The stranger turned and walked out. He had made his move. The game was on, and in the West, when the game started, someone always ended up dead. He walked back to his horse, looked at the gallows being built in the town square, at the jail where Henry waited to hang, at the saloon where Lydia stood alone. Tomorrow would be the day the truth came out, the day justice was served, the day the stranger made sure no one got away with murder. And he would be there, watching, waiting, ready. Because in the West, Justice wasn't served by the law. It was served by those willing to stand when everyone else stayed silent. What he found inside, he hadn't been prepared for that. The stranger walked out of Thorne's office, the door slamming behind him. He didn't look back. His mind raced. Pieces were clicking into place. Ashworth wasn't just killed, he was murdered, for profit, by someone close to him, someone who stood to gain everything from his death. He rode to the land registry office. The building was small, dusty, and smelled of old paper. A clerk sat behind a counter, his face buried in a ledger. "I need to see the property deeds for Ashworth and Blackwood," the stranger said. The clerk looked up, surprised. "That's private information?" The stranger leaned forward. "A man's life depends on it. Henry Blackwood is scheduled to hang tomorrow for killing Ashworth, but I know he's innocent." The clerk hesitated, looked around nervously. "I shouldn't be showing you this." "Just the deeds," the stranger said. "Nothing else." The clerk sighed. He pulled out a large book, flipped through the pages. "Here. Ashworth owned most of the east side of town, including the railroad contract. Very valuable." The stranger nodded. "And Blackwood?" "His land is here," the clerk said, pointing to a map. "Small farm, but it sits right next to Ashworth's new railroad expansion, the land Ashworth wanted for himself." The stranger's eyes narrowed. "Who was Ashworth's business partner?" The clerk closed the ledger. "That's confidential." "Was it his cousin?" the stranger asked. The clerk's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Because that's who killed him," the stranger said, "and that's who framed Blackwood." The clerk paled. "You can't prove that." "I'm getting close," the stranger said. "Where can I find Ashworth's cousin?" The clerk shook his head. "I can't tell you. It's not safe." "Safe for who?" the stranger asked. "For you? For the cousin? For Thorne?" The clerk swallowed hard. "The cousin's name is Reginald Ashworth. Same last name. They built the railroad together, but they were fighting. About money. About control. About who really owned what." The stranger nodded. "And when Ashworth died, everything went to his cousin?" The clerk nodded. "Everything. The land, the business, the railroad contract. Blackwood's land was supposed to be part of the expansion. That's why they wanted it. That's why they framed him." The stranger straightened up. "Where can I find Reginald Ashworth?" The clerk looked around nervously. "He lives at the Ashworth estate, on the north edge of town. But you should be careful. Thorne's men watch the place. They won't let anyone get close to him." The stranger walked out of the office, mounted his horse, rode toward the north edge of town. The Ashworth estate was large, a big house with a fence around it. 2 men stood guard at the gate. They had rifles in their hands. The stranger stopped his horse 100 yards away, watched, waited. One of the guards saw him, raised his hand, motioned for him to leave. The stranger didn't move, just watched the house. Then he saw movement inside. A man at an upstairs window, looking out, watching him. The stranger knew. That was Reginald Ashworth, the real killer, the man who framed Henry Blackwood. The stranger turned his horse, rode back toward town. He had what he needed. Proof that Ashworth's cousin was the killer. Proof that the murder was about land and money. Proof that Thorne was involved in the cover-up. But he still needed to make it public, to expose the truth before Blackwood hung. And he knew the real killer now knew he was on to him. The game had changed. The stakes were higher. And in the West, when the stakes were high, people died. He rode back toward the town square, toward the gallows, toward the jail, toward justice. And he knew. Tomorrow would be the day the truth came out, The day the stranger made sure no one got away with murder. What he found inside, he hadn't been prepared for that. The stranger rode back toward town, his mind racing. He knew Reginald Ashworth was the killer, knew Thorne helped frame Blackwood. But he needed proof, something undeniable, something that couldn't be explained away. He stopped his horse outside a small house on the edge of town. The same house where Father Thomas lived, the priest who knew the truth but was too afraid to speak. The stranger knocked on the door, waited. No answer. He knocked again. Louder this time. The door cracked open. Father Thomas peered out. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "You shouldn't be here," the priest whispered. "Thorne's men are looking for you. They know you're asking questions." The stranger stepped forward. "I need to find someone who saw Ashworth arguing with his cousin the night he died. Someone who can testify to what they saw." Father Thomas looked around nervously. There was a woman, Martha. She worked at the Ashworth estate. She saw them arguing that night. Loud voices, threats, something about land, about money. "Where is she now?" the stranger asked. "Disappeared," Father Thomas said. "After Ashworth died, she packed up and left. No one knows where." The stranger nodded. "Anyone else? Anyone who might have seen something?" Father Thomas hesitated, then whispered, "There was a stable boy, young lad, name of Caleb. He saw Ashworth and his cousin arguing near the stables, heard them talking about killing someone who stood in their way." "Where can I find Caleb?" the stranger asked. "Thorne's men took him away," Father Thomas said. "Said he was spreading lies. Haven't seen him since." The stranger straightened up. "Thank you." He turned to leave. Father Thomas called after him. "Be careful, stranger. They don't want the truth coming out. They'll stop you, by any means necessary." The stranger walked back to his horse, mounted up, rode toward the center of town. As he approached the saloon, he saw two men standing near the entrance. They weren't drinking. They were watching everyone who came and went. The stranger knew they were Thorne's men. They were watching for him. He rode past the saloon, didn't stop, kept going, toward the livery stable, where Caleb might have worked. The stable was empty, just a few horses in their stalls. The air smelled of hay and manure. A man in his 30s was mucking out a stall. He looked up when the stranger entered. "Looking for something?" the man asked. "I'm looking for Caleb," the stranger said. "The stable boy, the one who worked here." The man stopped mucking, looked around nervously. "Caleb's gone. Thorne's men took him away. Said he was spreading rumors." "Rumors about what?" the stranger asked. The man hesitated, then whispered, "About Ashworth, about his cousin, about how they were arguing the night Ashworth died, about how Caleb heard them talking about killing someone who stood in their way." The stranger nodded. "Did Caleb tell anyone else what he heard?" The man shook his head. "No one would listen. Not after what happened to the last person who talked." "What happened to them?" the stranger asked. The man looked around, whispered, "They disappeared. Just like Caleb. Just like Martha. No one knows where they went. No one knows if they're alive or dead." The stranger straightened up. "Thank you." He walked out of the stable, mounted his horse, rode back toward the town square, toward the gallows, toward the jail, toward the truth that no one wanted to see. As he approached the square, he saw Thorne and two of his men standing near the gallows. They were talking, watching, waiting. The stranger knew they were waiting for him, and they weren't going to let him get close to Henry. Not before the hanging. He rode past the square, didn't stop, kept going, toward the saloon, where Lydia stood alone, where he might find someone willing to help. As he dismounted and tied his horse, a man approached him. Young, nervous, his eyes darting around. "You're the stranger," the man said. "The one asking questions about Ashworth." The stranger nodded. "Who are you?" "Name's Jed," the man said. "The bartender in Silver Creek told me about you. Said you were looking for the truth." The stranger looked at Jed. "What do you know?" "I know what I saw," Jed said. "The night Ashworth died. I saw him arguing with his cousin, near the livery stable. Loud voices, threats, something about land, about money, about someone who stood in their way." The stranger nodded. "Why didn't you come forward before?" Jed swallowed hard. "I was scared. Thorne's men have been watching, threatening people, making examples of those who talk." The stranger looked at Jed. "Will you testify? Will you tell what you saw?" Jed hesitated, looked around, nervous. "I don't know, I'm scared. What if they come after me? What if they hurt my family?" The stranger understood. Fear was powerful, stronger than truth, stronger than justice. But he had to try. "I'll protect you," the stranger said. "I'll make sure they can't hurt you or your family." Jed looked at the stranger. Really looked at him, for the first time. "How can you promise that? You're just one man." The stranger didn't answer. Just looked at Jed. Looked at the gallows. Looked at the jail. Looked at the town square. Looked at the truth that no one wanted to see. "I'll be at the hanging tomorrow," the stranger said. "At noon. If you want to tell the truth, be there. If not, I understand." He turned and walked away. Not leaving. Just changing his position. Watching. Waiting. Planning. The truth was out there. He just had to find someone brave enough to speak it, before the noose tightened around Henry Blackwood's neck. And he would find it. Because in the West, justice wasn't served by the law. It was served by those willing to stand when everyone else stayed silent. What he found inside? He hadn't been prepared for that. The sun hung high over Deadwood. The town square was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder. Not a word was spoken. The gallows stood tall in the center. The rope hung down, thick and ugly. Henry Blackwood stood on the platform. His hands were bound. His face was pale. His eyes were closed. Sheriff Silas Thorne stood at the gallows. He adjusted his hat, looked at the crowd. "The hour has come," he announced. "Henry Blackwood will pay for his crime." Thorne turned to Blackwood. "Any last words?" Henry opened his eyes, looked at the crowd, looked at the gallows, looked at the sky. "I'm innocent," he said. His voice was weak but clear. "I didn't kill Ashworth. But no one cared." Thorne nodded. "The time is now." The hangman moved toward the lever. The crowd held its breath. Lydia stood at the front, her face streaked with tears. Father Thomas stood near the church. He looked away. Couldn't watch. Then the stranger stepped forward. He walked through the crowd, parting them like water. His red bandana stood out against his gray vest. His rifle rested across his shoulder. He stopped at the base of the gallows. "Stop," the stranger said. His voice cut through the silence. Thorne turned, surprised. "This is not your place." "The truth is my place," the stranger said. "And today the truth will be heard." Thorne laughed. "The truth?" Blackwood confessed. His gun was found. The money was found. He's guilty. The stranger shook his head. "He's innocent. And I have proof." He turned to the crowd. Henry Blackwood was in Silver Creek the night Ashworth died, at the saloon, from 7 p.m. until after midnight. The bartender can testify. So can a man named Jed. Thorne's face hardened. Lies. All lies. Are they? The stranger asked. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a document, held it up. This is the deed to Ashworth's land. The land he wanted. The land his cousin wanted, too. The land that was worth killing for. The stranger looked toward the Ashworth estate. Reginald Ashworth is the killer, not Henry, his own cousin. They argued that night. About land, about money, about who was really in charge. And when Ashworth refused to give in, his cousin killed him, then framed Blackwood to take the land. A murmur went through the crowd. People looked at each other, whispered, wondered. Thorne stepped forward. This is nonsense. You're trying to... The stranger cut him off. I'm not done. There's more. He turned to Jed, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd. Jed, tell them what you saw. Jed stepped forward, nervous, but determined. I saw Ashworth and his cousin arguing that night, near the livery stable, loud voices, threats, something about land, about money, about someone who stood in their way. The crowd gasped. Thorne's face turned red. You're lying, all of you. Then movement from the crowd. A man pushed through, tall, dressed fine. It was Reginald Ashworth. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. That's enough, Ashworth said. His voice trembled. The stranger looked at him. You're the one who killed your cousin, isn't that right? Ashworth reached for his gun. I'll silence you all. Before he could draw, the stranger was faster. His hand moved. His gun was in his hand, aimed at Ashworth. Don't move. But Ashworth was panicked, desperate. He pulled his gun, fired. The shot missed. The stranger fired back. Ashworth fell, clutching his chest. Silence. Then chaos. The crowd scattered. Thorne reached for his gun. But the stranger was faster. His gun was aimed at Thorne now. Don't even think about it, the stranger said. Thorne froze, his hands in the air. The stranger looked at the gallows, at Henry, at the rope. Cut him down. Two men from the crowd rushed forward, cut the rope, lowered the platform. Henry fell to the ground, coughing, gasping for air. Lydia rushed to his side, held him, cried, He's innocent, I told you. I told you all. The stranger looked at the body of Reginald Ashworth, at the panicked crowd, at Thorne, still with his hands in the air, at Father Thomas, who was finally watching, at the truth that had been hidden for so long. The stranger turned, walked back to his horse, mounted up, didn't look back. The town had its justice now. The truth was out. Henry was free. The killer was dead. The corrupt sheriff was exposed. And the stranger? He just rode on, because in the West, justice wasn't served by the law. It was served by those willing to stand when everyone else stayed silent. What he found inside, he hadn't been prepared for that. The crowd stood frozen in silence. Reginald Ashworth lay motionless on the dusty ground, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Henry Blackwood gasped for air as Lydia helped him sit up. The hangman's rope still hung above them, a reminder of what almost happened. Sheriff Thorne slowly lowered his hands. His face was pale. It's over, he said, his voice trembling. The truth is out. Two deputies moved forward. They didn't reach for their guns. They walked toward Thorne. Sheriff, you're under arrest, one said, for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Thorne didn't resist. He just nodded. I should have done the right thing from the start. Father Thomas stepped forward. I can testify, he said. I knew the truth all along. I was too afraid to speak. Lydia wiped tears from her eyes. Thank you, she whispered to the stranger. You saved him." The stranger didn't answer. He just watched as Thorne was led away. Watched as the crowd's fear turned to relief. Watched as Henry was helped to his feet. Watched as justice finally came to Deadwood. The stranger turned and walked toward his horse. He mounted up without a word. He didn't look back. Didn't wait for thanks. Didn't wait for praise. He just rode out of town. The red bandana around his neck fluttered in the breeze. His rifle rested across his lap. As he rode away, he thought about the faces he'd left behind. Henry, free at last. Lydia, with her husband back in her arms. Father Thomas, finally able to speak the truth. Thorne, facing the consequences of his corruption. The stranger knew he'd done what needed to be done. He'd brought justice to a town that had lost its way. He'd given Henry a second chance. He'd exposed the truth. He'd made sure no one got away with murder. And that was enough. In the West, justice wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what was right, even when no one else would. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support is what brings these stories to more people.